Why was everyone silent when she walked into the room? Not a cough, not a scrape of chair, just eyes that tracked her, some with respect, some with something colder, harder to name. She moved with a steady rhythm, boots on concrete echoing against walls lined with maps and flickering projectors. Her shoulders were square, her face unreadable, but inside, the silence pressed heavier than any gunmetal weight. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not after what happened. Not after the mission that left more coffins than survivors. And yet she was here. Her name wasn't whispered, it wasn't called, it wasn't even written on the assignment roster. But the orders had come down anyway, sealed, signed, deliberate. A new operation, a new target, a new chance. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The officer at the head of the table cleared his throat. His voice was clipped, functional. You all know why you've been called in. He tapped the map with a knuckle. Remote mountains, no man's land. Intel says there's a network out there, communications, weapons, maybe worse. We don't send in divisions, we send in shadows. Her eyes narrowed at the phrase. Shadows. That was what they had called her once, too, back when missions were cleaner, when she still believed orders carried purpose, not just weight. She studied the faces around the table. Two younger operatives, whispering nerves under their breath. A medic with eyes that hadn't slept in days. A radio tech scribbling notes he'd forget later. And one sergeant, older, scarred, who looked at her and didn't look away. They didn't know her story, not all of it. Rumors, maybe, a survivor, a curse. The one who walked out when the others didn't. Survival wasn't luck. But try telling that to the men who zipped up body bags while staring at the ground. She kept her jaw locked. If they saw the flicker in her eyes, they'd know. She didn't want them to know. The officer's words droned on routes, extraction points, contingencies, but she barely heard. She was already elsewhere, back in the cold valley where the snow never melted, back in the ringing silence after the firefight ended. Back in the moment she refused to close her eyes because closing them meant giving in. The briefing ended. Chairs scraped this time. Voices returned, a cough, a nervous laugh, only she lingered. The officer caught her eye. You'll lead them, he said simply. Her stomach coiled, not from fear, from the weight, from the fact that leading meant carrying lives in her hands again. She wanted to ask why me, but she knew the answer. Because she didn't die last time. The others filed out. The scarred sergeant stayed. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just studied her like a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. Finally, he muttered, they think survival makes you stronger. Sometimes it just makes you harder to kill. She didn't answer, couldn't. That night she packed in silence. Rifle stripped, cleaned, reassembled by memory. A photograph slipped from the folds of her bag. She froze, fingers brushing its edges. A child's face. A promise she made long before the missions began. Her reason, her anchor. The thing no one in the briefing room would ever know. She tucked it back away deep, where no eyes could reach. The flight out was gray, clouds heavy, rotors chopping the sky into uneasy rhythm. No one spoke much. The medic dozed, lips twitching with dreams he'd never admit. The tech fiddled with his gear, hands trembling just enough to betray him. The young operatives stared at their boots like answers might be written there. The sergeant, he watched her still, always. When the bird touched down, the air was colder, thinner. Mountains stretched like jagged teeth, shadows carving valleys where no sunlight reached. The silence here was different. It wasn't waiting, it was watching. They moved as a unit, boots crunching frost, breath fogging in tight bursts. She led point, steps careful, rifle slung with ease born of habit, not comfort. Every rustle of wind through pine needles sounded like footsteps. Every distant crack of ice felt like a trigger pulled too far away to stop. Her heart stayed steady. She learned how. The trick wasn't in controlling fear, it was in folding it, tucking it inside until it became something sharp, something useful. Hours passed. The mountains didn't end. But the signs began, wires half buried in snow, tire tracks too fresh to be natural, the faint whine of a generator carried on the wind. The young operative to her left whispered, "Are we close?" She didn't answer. Instead, she raised a hand, halting the column. Breath froze midair. Through her scope, she saw them. Not soldiers, not villagers, something in between. Armed, watchful, and too organized to be accidental. The mission was real. The intel was right. She dropped the scope, exhaled slow. The sergeant came up beside her, low voice. "What's your call?" Her call, always her call. She thought of the photograph buried in her bag, of the silence in the briefing room, of the officer's eyes when he said, "You'll lead them." She whispered back, "We wait. Darkness will cover what daylight won't forgive." So they waited. The cold bit deeper as the sun bled out behind the peaks. Fingers numbed, muscles stiffened, but she didn't flinch. She watched, counted, measured the rhythm of guards packing, the sweep of their rifles, the flicker of light from inside the compound. Patterns, always patterns. The medic muttered something about frostbite. The tech's teeth chattered. One of the young operatives whispered a prayer. And then movement, not from the guards, from deeper inside. A figure dragged, bound, stumbling. Her chest tightened, not from the cold this time. It was a prisoner. The guards shoved him down, kicked him once, and laughed, then left him chained to a post like a warning. She looked away from the scope, her pulse hammered now. The sergeant caught it. "You know him." Her voice was too steady. "No." But it wasn't true. She knew the walk, the tilt of his head, the stubborn set of his jaw. She knew him. And she hadn't expected to ever see him again. The cold seemed to deepen around her, the silence louder. The team shifted restlessly, waiting for orders. She said nothing, not yet. Because if she told them who he was, why he mattered, the mission would never be the same. And missions didn't bend for personal ghosts. Not officially. But inside her, a new command stirred, one stronger than the orders written on paper, one no officer could stamp or sign away. She couldn't leave him here. Not again. The mountains didn't care about her vow. The night didn't soften. The guards didn't slacken. But somewhere inside, the refusal burned. Refusal to accept death. Refusal to let fate dictate. Refusal to watch another life be stolen while she stood silent. Her hand tightened on the rifle. The cold metal answered like an old friend. The sergeant's whisper cut through the dark. "Your call." She inhaled, slow, deep. The weight pressed down from every direction. And then she whispered the only truth she knew. "Not tonight." What if the mission had never been about the compound? The thought slipped into her mind as the night deepened, as the prisoner's silhouette swayed against the post under moonlight. It gnawed at her, quiet, relentless. Orders said the network inside was priority. Orders didn't mention prisoners. Orders rarely did. But his face. The younger operative shifted beside her, whispering, "Ma'am, what's the holdup?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the compound. Guards rotated, flashlights slicing across the snow, breath fogging in lantern light. Every detail mattered. Every second wasted risked exposure. And yet she couldn't pull her scope away from that prisoner. Not after everything. Not after all the years where she'd sworn to bury the past. Finally she whispered, "We wait. We move only when it matters." The operative huffed, frustration veiled but not invisible. He didn't understand. None of them did. They hadn't carried ghosts on their backs, hadn't walked out of valleys with silence screaming in their ears. To them this was another mission. To her it was a fractured line she couldn't show. The sergeant crouched lower, close enough that she felt his breath warm against the frozen night. "You know him," he murmured. Her jaw flexed. She said nothing. He studied her, then quiet, almost pitying, "Secrets get people killed." She wanted to snap at him, tell him not everything could be spoken aloud in a war that fed on confessions. Instead, she turned her eyes back to the guards and whispered, "Keep the men quiet. We move at shift change." The sergeant didn't push, not yet. Minutes stretched into hours. The cold dug deep, bones aching, breath burning. The medic flexed his fingers, whispered curses into his sleeve. The radio tech's hands trembled so badly she thought the comm might slip from his grip. The two young operatives leaned against each other, exhaustion making them reckless. She didn't blink, couldn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the prisoner. Because she remembered. Years ago, before this endless chain of missions, before the silence and the scars, he'd been the one who taught her how to shoot straight, how to breathe with the trigger, how to trust the stillness between heartbeats. A mentor, a friend. And when her life split apart, when she left behind promises and walked into the machinery of war, he'd been one of the few faces she couldn't forget. Now here he was, chained, bruised, left like bait in a world that never forgave weakness. When the guards switched, two peeling off for a smoke near the far truck, she gave the signal, a flick of her hand, a shadow's command. They moved, silent, low, boots pressing snow without crunch, rifles angled with purpose. Every step was a breath stolen from fate. They reached the perimeter wall. Frost clung to steel, barbed wire like frozen teeth above. The tech unpacked his cutters, lips pale, teeth chattering. "Steady," she whispered. The metal snapped softly, wire bent, an opening formed. One by one, the team slipped through. The medic last, muttering about frostbite and bad omens. Inside the compound, shadows stretched long. Generators hummed, a low growl under the night. Oil and smoke tainted the air. Somewhere deeper, muffled voices traded commands in a language not all of them understood. She crouched, hand raised. "Wait, listen, count." Two guards at the far corner, one smoking, one packing, routine, predictable. But the prisoner, his breath was shallow now. She could hear it even from here. Each exhale a ragged rasp. He wouldn't last much longer. The sergeant caught her eye. His look was sharp, demanding, mission or man. She clenched her teeth. The plan was the command center, the communications hub. Cut it down and the network fractured. That was the mission. That was survival for countless others. But the prisoner. Her chest ached with the weight of both truths. Finally, she whispered, "Change of plan. We get him first." The sergeant's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. He motioned to the young operatives. "Flank, cover." They moved. Snow crunched faintly under the guard's boots. Smoke curled from his cigarette, glowing faint orange against the dark. She timed the rhythm of his breath, the turn of his head, the sweep of his hand. One shot suppressed, clean. The cigarette fell. His body crumpled into snow. The packing guard froze, too late. The sergeant's blade slid across his throat, silent and sure. He lowered the body without a sound. They advanced. The prisoner's head lifted weakly, eyes barely open. Recognition flickered there, painful, raw. Her heart jolted. He tried to speak, couldn't. She dropped beside him, hands working at the chains. The iron bit into her palms. The medic appeared, cutting, prying, whispering curses through clenched teeth. Finally, the chains fell. The prisoner slumped forward, body caught by her arms. He was lighter than she remembered, weaker, broken. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Not yet, don't give in." His lips moved, barely a sound, but she caught it, one word. "Why?" Her throat tightened. Because she refused. Because she wouldn't let death take him the way it had taken so many others. Because survival wasn't luck, it was choice, and she was making it again here now. She swallowed hard. "Because I won't leave you behind." But the night wasn't done. From deeper in the compound, a shout erupted, then another. Lights flared, boots thundered. The radio tech hissed, "We're blown." She snapped her rifle up, sight locking on the first shadow rounding the corner. Trigger squeezed. Muzzle flash swallowed by the suppressor's cough. Enemy down. But more came, too many. The compound roared alive, voices crashing like a tide, weapons clattering. The sergeant grabbed her shoulder. "We move now or none of us leave." The prisoner sagged against her, dead weight, but she tightened her grip, teeth bared. "Then we move," she growled. The team surged toward the gap in the fence. Bullets cracked against metal, sparks showering. Shouts chased them, angry, endless. One of the young operatives stumbled, yelping. Blood sprayed across snow. The medic grabbed him, dragging, cursing. "Go," the operative cried, voice breaking. "No one stays," she snapped back. Her rifle barked, covering them, every shot a heartbeat. They spilled through the wire, into the night, into the mountains. The prisoner wheezed in her arms. The young operative bled against the medic's shoulder. The tech gasped as he scrambled, panic riding his every step. The sergeant stayed at the rear, gunfire cracking, voice hoarse with commands. Snow swallowed their tracks. Darkness devoured their shapes. The compound howled behind them, fury rising. But they were out for now. They collapsed into a hollow carved by wind and ice, breath ragged, bodies shivering, silence falling heavy once more. The medic pressed hands to the operative's wound, blood-soaking gloves. "It's bad, real bad." The young man whimpered, eyes glassy. The prisoner coughed, a wet, rattling sound. His gaze found hers again. "Why risk them?" he rasped. Her eyes burned. Because missions weren't just orders. Because survival wasn't just hers. Because carrying lives meant refusing to let any be stolen when she could still fight. She didn't answer aloud, not yet. The sergeant's stare cut into her. "You just painted us into a corner. They'll hunt us till dawn." She wiped blood from her gloves, steadying her breath. "Then we don't give them dawn." The team stared at her, some with trust, some with fear. The prisoner trembled in her arms, his weight pressing every choice she'd made, every risk, every life now tethered to her refusal. And inside her chest, the old silence stirred again. The silence of that valley long ago. The silence of men buried, names unspoken. Not this time. She tightened her grip on her rifle, eyes cutting toward the horizon where faint stars flickered through breaking clouds. "We hold," she said quietly. "We hold till morning." No one answered, not at first. Then the medic muttered, "God help us." The sergeant snorted, "God's not here." Her voice was softer, steadier, and it cut through both. "Maybe not, but I am." And for the first time that night, no one argued. What breaks first, the body or the will? The question gnawed at her as the horizon lightened, a dull gray bleeding over jagged peaks. Dawn was cruel up here. It stripped shadows, erased hiding places, forced the hunted into open air. And they were hunted now. Every breath carried that truth. The medic worked by touch, fingers numb and trembling, pressing rags against the young operative's wound. Blood seeped anyway, dark against snow, refusing to stop. The boy groaned, his voice barely human. "We can't move him," the medic muttered, shaking his head. "Not like this, he won't last a mile." The radio tech snapped, voice cracking. "Then what? Leave him. You saw what they're capable of." Her voice cut through. "We don't leave anyone." Silence followed, heavy, crushing, the kind of silence where doubt lived. The sergeant crouched nearby, rifle across his knees, eyes never leaving her face. "We're not voting, are we?" Her jaw tightened. "No." The prisoner stirred, coughing, his breath rattling against her shoulder where she'd propped him up. He looked thinner in daylight, skin ashen, eyes sunken. Still, his gaze carried weight, recognition, memory. "You haven't changed," he whispered. His voice was sandpaper, breaking with every syllable. She froze, that voice. The same one that once barked orders on ranges, that corrected her stance, that told her no one survives alone. It was weaker now, frayed by captivity. But it was him. And the past she had buried clawed its way back. The young operative groaned again. "It hurts," he whimpered. She forced her attention back, knelt beside him, pressed a hand against his chest. "Stay with us, just breathe. In, out, that's all you need to do right now." His eyes fluttered. Too young, too raw. She wanted to scream at the universe for sending boys into hell and calling it duty. Instead, she whispered, "You're not done yet. Hear me, not done." The medic caught her eyes, silently asking the question neither wanted to voice. What if he is? Her throat ached. She turned away, scanning the ridgeline. Nothing yet, no movement, but she knew they were out there, searching, waiting. The sergeant finally spoke. "We need to move before the sun pins us down. If we stay, we're dead." She looked back at the prisoner. His lips moved again, barely a whisper. "Cave north." Her eyes narrowed. "What cave?" He coughed, a wet, shuddering sound. "Supplies safe hidden." The sergeant leaned closer, suspicion hard in his voice. "Or it's a trap." She searched the prisoner's face, saw the truth there, or the pain, or both. Trust wasn't a luxury she could afford, but choices had weight, and standing still wasn't one of them. North, she decided. The sergeant didn't argue, but his jaw clenched like stone. They moved. The medic and radio tech struggled under the young operative's weight, every step leaving a trail of crimson on white snow. The prisoner stumbled against her, his breath rasping in shallow bursts. The sergeant brought up the rear, eyes scanning, rifle always ready. The mountains stretched endless. Snow crunched, wind howled, breath smoked the air. Dawn brightened, cruel and relentless. Then voices behind them, shouts carried by the wind. "They've got dogs," the sergeant hissed. Her stomach knotted. Dogs meant time was measured in breaths, not hours. "Move faster," she ordered. The medic snapped. "He can't move faster." His voice cracked with frustration, grief already bleeding through. The young operative whimpered again. Don't leave me." Her chest burned. "We won't." The prisoner clutched her sleeve, his grip surprisingly strong for someone so broken. "The cave," he rasped. She pushed harder, forced the team forward. Every step was agony, every heartbeat a drumbeat of pursuit. Finally they saw it, a dark scar in the mountainside, half hidden by drifts, a mouth cut into stone, swallowing daylight. They stumbled inside. The air shifted instantly, damp, cold, carrying the smell of old smoke and stone. Shadows wrapped around them, shelter and threat all at once. The radio tech collapsed, gasping. The medic dropped to his knees, ripping open packs, searching for anything to slow the bleeding. The young operative's skin was pale now, lips blue, his eyes glassy. "Stay with me," the medic begged. "Don't you quit, damn it." The prisoner slumped against the wall, coughing hard, blood flecking his lips. His eyes met hers again, piercing despite the weakness. "They'll find us," he whispered. "Not much time." She crouched close. "Then talk. Why are you here? Why were you their prisoner?" For a long moment he just breathed, ragged, broken. Then he said, "Because I knew too much." Her chest tightened. The sergeant growled, "Start making sense." The prisoner's gaze flicked to him, then back to her. "The network, it isn't just guns and radios. It's information, names, routes, leverage. They wanted what I knew about us, about our operations, about you." The words struck like a blade. "Me," she whispered. He nodded weakly. "You're on their list. They knew you survived, and they wanted to know why." Her breath hitched. The silence of the cave seemed to press harder now, suffocating. The young operative whimpered again. The medic's hands were red to the wrists. The boy's chest rose and fell, too shallow, too slow. She moved closer, taking the boy's hand. His skin was cold. "You're not alone," she whispered. "Not here, not ever." His lips parted, trying to form words. No sound came. Only a faint smile, childlike, broken before his eyes slipped shut. The medic shook his head, tears in his voice. "He's gone." Her stomach twisted. The boy's hand was still warm in hers. She gripped it tighter, as if she could hold him here by will alone. Survival wasn't luck. but sometimes survival was cruelty. She closed his eyes gently, pressing his hand against his chest. The silence that followed was worse than gunfire. Heavy, final. The radio tech muttered, voice trembling, "This is wrong. We're dying out here for nothing." The sergeant barked, "Shut it." But she didn't. She turned, her voice low, sharp. "He gave us time, don't waste it." The prisoner coughed again, pain racking his frame. "He's right, though. If you stay here, you'll die." She studied him, fury and sorrow mixing in her chest. "Then why lead us here?" His answer was barely audible. "Because there's something hidden here, something they can't find, something that might turn this war." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Or something that gets us all killed." The prisoner didn't flinch. "It's your choice, but if you walk away now, all the blood spilled tonight means nothing." The medic slumped against the wall, eyes hollow. The radio tech curled into himself, shaking. She stood, the weight of the boy's death pressing into her shoulders, into her chest. Her rifle hung heavy at her side. The cave was dark, endless. Somewhere inside, maybe truth, maybe a trap. The prisoner watched her, silent, waiting. The sergeant's voice was a low growl. "Your call." Always her call. Her breath fogged in the cold air, slow and deliberate. She looked at the boy's body one last time, at the medic's stained hands, at the prisoner's hollow eyes. And then she whispered, "Show me." The prisoner nodded once, weak but certain. The cave swallowed them deeper. What waits in the dark, rescue or ruin? The question lingered as they pressed deeper into the cave. The air grew colder, heavier, each breath echoing against stone walls. Their boots scuffed against gravel, the sound unnervingly loud after so many hours of forced silence outside. Her rifle was steady in her hands, but her heart was. It hammered in her chest, each beat reminding her how much she carried, too much. A dead boy's face still fresh in her mind. A prisoner whose truth she wasn't sure she could bear. A team fraying at the edges. The radio tech's voice cracked in the dark. "This doesn't feel right, feels like a grave." The sergeant snapped. "Everything feels like a grave if you stare too long. Keep moving." The prisoner stumbled. She caught his arm, pulling him forward. His weight was fragile, like carrying bones wrapped in cloth, and yet his eyes, still sharp, still knowing. They reached a chamber, wider than expected. The ceiling vanished into shadow. On the ground, wooden crates, some cracked, some marked with faded stencils. A relic cache hidden and forgotten. The medic whistled low. Supplies, ammunition, enough to resupply a platoon. The sergeant knelt by one, pried it open. Inside, radios old but functional. A cache of secrets waiting. The prisoner leaned against the wall, his voice rasping. "They never found this place. I made sure of it, for years." Her stomach twisted. "Why?" His gaze found hers. "Because war isn't won by firepower, it's won by what people know. And I knew this," he coughed, blood wetting his lips, "would matter." The sergeant snapped. "Matter how? Old radios and bullets don't win wars." The prisoner's voice steadied, sharpened despite the weakness. "Inside those crates are files, names, contacts, proof, enough to burn their network from the inside." The medic muttered, "Or enough to burn us." Silence followed, heavy. Her hands clenched the rifle tighter. This was no longer just survival. This was a pivot point, a choice that could tilt the scales or bury them deeper. The radio tech's voice cracked, desperation lacing it. "Then what do? We can't carry all this. We can't even carry him." His finger jabbed toward the prisoner, trembling. Her chest tightened. The prisoner didn't flinch. He simply said, "Then you take what matters." The medic wiped blood on his sleeve, voice sharp. "And leave you to die. That your plan?" The prisoner's eyes flicked to her again. "That's not her way, is it?" The words hit harder than gunfire, because he was right. That wasn't her way, it had never been, not in that valley years ago, not last night, not now. But every choice carved scars. She lowered her rifle slowly, breath steadying. "We take the files, enough to matter, enough to end this." The sergeant frowned. "And extraction? You think command will send a bird for ghosts carrying stolen proof? They'll deny us before we land." Her voice was quiet. "Then we don't land." The silence stretched. The team looked at her like she'd spoken madness, but in her chest the refusal burned brighter. The prisoner coughed again, sliding down the wall. "You always had that fire, that refusal, even back then." His eyes softened. "That's why I taught you." Her throat closed. Memories bled in, firing ranges at dusk, laughter swallowed by orders, lessons carved into muscle memory. A voice that had guided her long before the silence of that valley. She wanted to hate him for being here, for dragging ghosts into her mission, but she couldn't. Because without him, she wouldn't have survived long enough to carry this burden. A sound cut through, distant, muffled. The sergeant froze, head cocked. "They're tracking close." Her stomach dropped. "The dogs." The radio tech panicked, fumbling with his gear. "We can't stay here." The medic snapped. "And run where?" "Into their arms." The prisoner's voice was weak, urgent. "There's a shaft, back of the chamber, narrow, leads higher. They won't know it exists." The sergeant snarled, "Convenient." But she saw it, the flicker in his eyes. Not deception, desperation. Truth, jagged and sharp. She moved without hesitation, flashlight beam sweeping the wall. And there it was, a crack in the stone, barely wide enough for a man. Hidden by crates. Her pulse quickened. Hope. "Move the supplies," she ordered. The team scrambled. Wood splintered, crates shoved aside. The crack widened enough for bodies to squeeze through. Cold air drifted from within, carrying promise. The prisoner tried to stand, failed. His body sagged, too weak. She caught him again, lifted his arm over her shoulder. The sergeant growled, "He'll slow us down." She met his eyes, steel in her voice. "Then we move slower." For a moment silence, then he nodded once, sharp, resigned. They squeezed into the shaft. Stone scraped shoulders, the passage suffocatingly tight. The radio tech whimpered, breath echoing too loud. The medic cursed under his breath, dragging his pack. The sergeant pushed from behind, muttering about death in narrow places. She kept her breathing even, her pace steady. One hand gripping the prisoner, the other sliding her rifle forward inch by inch. Above, faint light seeped through cracks. Not sunlight, torches, moving, searching. Her stomach clenched. They were close, too close. The prisoner's breath rattled beside her. "If we make it, you'll have to choose." She frowned. "Choose what?" His eyes glimmered in the dim light. "Whether to give them the truth or bury it." The word struck deep, because she knew. If command saw these files, saw proof of what their enemies had built, it would mean escalation. More missions, more lives fed into the machine. And if she buried it, the war would continue anyway, blind and endless. The weight pressed harder. The shaft narrowed. They squeezed, scraped, grunted, sweat mixed with frost dripping, breath fogged, time stretched. Finally, they emerged. The shaft opened into a ledge high above the valley. Snow swept across jagged cliffs, wind screaming. Below, figures moved, flashlights, dogs, voices. The sergeant cursed low. "They're already here." Her chest ached. Every choice had led them higher, tighter, cornered again. The prisoner leaned against her, whispering, "But you're still alive. That's what matters, always." She looked at him, at his broken frame, at the truth he carried. Survival wasn't luck, but what if survival wasn't enough? The radio tech whispered, voice shaking, "What now?" The sergeant's gaze fixed on her. "Your call." Always her call. The wind howled. The valley below crawled with enemies. The files in their packs weighed heavier than stone. The prisoner's eyes bore into hers, waiting. She inhaled, slow, deep, and whispered the only command that mattered. "Up higher we climb." Because death might be waiting below, but she refused to give it the last word. The mountain didn't forgive. Every inch upward was a bargain struck with pain. Fingers clawed into frozen rock, boots slipped on slick stone, breath burned white against the black. The shaft had spit them onto the ledge, but the ledge was only the beginning. Above was jagged cliff, a cruel spine cutting into the sky. She led first, her rifle slung across her back, one hand always gripping the prisoner, the other clutching ice-bitten stone. Behind them, the medic cursed with each move. The sergeant growled orders like prayers, and the radio tech whimpered, muttering about falls that never ended. The prisoner said nothing. His body was frail, collapsing against her with every slip, but his silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. She felt it in the way his eyes never stopped scanning, his mind never stopped working. Even in his broken frame, he carried command like a shadow. The wind screamed louder the higher they climbed. Loose snow whipped against their faces, stinging like glass. Her knuckles bled where the rock bit too deep, but she didn't falter. Couldn't. Not with eyes below, searchlights cutting across the valley. The enemy dogs barked, echoes carried upward. They weren't far, not far enough. The sergeant spat through chattering teeth. "This is suicide. We'll freeze before we're shot." The medic barked back. "Freezing's quieter. You prefer barking dogs at your throat." The radio tech sobbed. "I prefer home." She snapped without looking down, then climbed faster. Her words cut through the wind. They climbed. Hours bled into a blur. The cliff had no end, no mercy. Her shoulders burned from carrying both rifle and prisoner, legs shaking under the weight. But stopping meant death, and she didn't know how to stop. At last they found a narrow shelf, barely wide enough to crouch, less to rest, but it was shelter if only for a breath. The team collapsed. The medic's hands trembled as he unwrapped frozen bandages. The radio tech curled against stone, eyes shut tight. The sergeant sat like a statue, staring at the abyss below. She eased the prisoner down. His breath rattled, but his eyes never left hers. "You carry too much," he murmured. She ignored the weight in his tone, the way it cut deeper than the cold. She tore open a ration, pressed it into his hand. He didn't take it. Instead, he whispered, "You still don't understand." Her jaw clenched. Understand what? That survival isn't about carrying everyone. It's about deciding who you can't. The words sliced. She heard the medic mutter under his breath, "He's right." Her head whipped toward him. "Say that again." The medic's eyes were hollow, voice cracking. "We can't keep him. He's dead weight. We'll die for him." The sergeant grunted in agreement, his breath fogging. "Orders or not, you know it. He slows us, drains us. He's one man, we're four." The radio tech whimpered, rocking. "Leave him, please, leave him." The prisoner didn't argue, didn't plead. He just looked at her, waiting. The silence pressed, heavier than the storm. Her chest burned, because they were right. Every step with him was slower. Every breath with him was risk. But letting go, leaving him, that wasn't survival. That was surrender. And she couldn't surrender, not ever. Her voice was steady. "We carry him, we carry the files, we carry it all because that's what we do." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Even if it kills us." Her gaze didn't break, especially then. The medic cursed, slamming his pack down. The radio tech sobbed harder, but none of them moved to defy her. Because somewhere in their bones, they knew she was right. Or maybe they just couldn't match the fire in her voice. The prisoner coughed, a harsh, wet sound. Then he whispered, "That's why I chose you." The words hit harder than the wind. Her throat tightened. "Chose me for what?" His lips curled in something between a smile and a grimace. "For this, to carry the truth when no one else could." She wanted to demand answers, to force the secrets from his chest, but his body sagged against the rock, breath fatting. The moment slipped away. Above, the wind shifted. Voices carried, enemy patrols, closer. Her heart lurched. They'd been tracked again. The sergeant hissed, hand on his weapon, "We can't stay." She pulled the prisoner upright, muscles screaming in protest, her voice cut like steel. Then we climb. The mountain swallowed them again. Night bled into dawn without light, only a smear of gray behind storm clouds. The team moved like ghosts, bodies raw, throats rour. The prisoner coughed blood into the snow. The medic whispered curses at every wound he couldn't fix. The radio tech's eyes were hollow, staring at nothing. She kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option. But cracks were showing, not in the mountain, in them. The sergeant halted at a narrow crossing, ice stretching between two jagged cliffs. His jaw was tight, his eyes harder. Enough. She froze. Keep moving. He shook his head. We end this now. His hand drifted to his weapon, not toward the valley, toward the prisoner. Her blood ran cold. Don't. The sergeant's voice was low, controlled. He's dead weight. He's not a soldier anymore. He's a liability. We leave him or we die with him. The medic's silence was an answer. The radio tech's sobbing was another. She raised her rifle, slow and deliberate. Step back. The sergeant met her eyes. No fear, just cold, hard resolve. You'd kill me for him. Her voice didn't waver. I'd kill anyone who tries to decide my mission for me. The wind howled between them, sharper than any blade. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the prisoner spoke. His voice was weak, but it carried. He's right. Her heart lurched. She looked at him. Don't. But his eyes held hers, calm, almost peaceful. I've carried this long enough. Maybe it's time to let go. The sergeant nodded once, ready. But she stepped between them, rifle steady. No, not while I breathe. The prisoner's eyes softened, filled with something almost like sorrow. Then you'll drown in it. Maybe he was right. Maybe carrying him, carrying the files, carrying the weight of every choice would drown her. But she refused to lay it down. Because survival wasn't luck. Survival was refusal. And she would refuse until her last breath. The sergeant's jaw tightened. His hand dropped from his weapon, for now. They moved on. But the fracture remained, raw and bleeding. The climb grew steeper, the prisoner weaker, the files heavier. And in the back of her mind, a question gnawed. Was she carrying them all to survival? Or to the grave? The storm didn't ease. It thickened. Snow came sideways now, driven by winds that could peel skin. They moved blind, ropes tied between them, boots sinking knee-deep, eyes narrowed against the endless white. The mountain was no longer stone and ice. It was a living thing, snarling, howling, striking at them with teeth of cold. Every step demanded more than the last. Muscles screamed, lungs clawed for air. The prisoner stumbled every few paces, coughing red into the snow. She pulled him forward anyway, her hand locked on his arm. He weighed less than her rifle now, but the burden was heavier than ever. Behind her, the medic muttered like a man praying to deaf gods. The radio tech whimpered, words lost in the wind. The sergeant silent, too silent. She kept glancing back, waiting for him to make his move, waiting for the fight they hadn't finished on the ice bridge. His eyes burned through the storm, steady, cold. He hadn't let go of the thought. He was just waiting for her to falter. She wouldn't. Not when the ridge appeared ahead, a jagged wall of stone, barely climbable in the storm. The only way forward, the only way out. She stopped at its base, breath ragged, her voice cracked through the storm. We climb. The medic groaned, collapsing to his knees. Climb in this, we'll die before halfway. The radio tech shook his head violently, panic bursting through his numbness. No, 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 we can't. This is suicide. She cut him with her glare. We don't stop, not here. The sergeant's voice rumbled low. Or maybe here, where we decide who keeps going. Her jaw clenched. She turned to him, rifle still slung but hand close. Say it. He stepped closer, storm whipping around him. He dies here. We don't. That's the choice. The prisoner's head sagged, his breath shallow. Yet when he lifted his eyes, there was no fear, only exhaustion, only inevitability. The medic didn't argue this time. The radio tech nodded furiously, desperate, almost grateful. She felt the weight of their stares, pressing her into the snow. Her hand trembled on the prisoner's shoulder. Her heart pounded like war drums. And she heard her own voice, quiet but unyielding. No. The sergeant's lips curled into something bitter. Then you've chosen their graves too. His hand went to his weapon. The world froze. She raised her rifle, the storm a howl around them. Her finger brushed cold steel. The prisoner whispered, "Enough." But nothing was enough, not here. Then a sound, different from the storm, a crack, not thunder, not rockfall. A shot. Snow exploded near her head. The enemy had found them. Her eyes widened, heart lurching. The ridge wasn't just an obstacle, it was a kill zone. Silhouettes moved through the storm below, shadows with rifles, voices shouting in a language she knew too well. The sergeant swore, throwing himself against the rock. The medic scrambled for cover. The radio tech screamed. She grabbed the prisoner, dragging him flat against the ridge. Bullets tore the snow around them, sharp, relentless. The storm had hidden them, now it trapped them. The sergeant's eyes met hers, fury and fear colliding. "Still think we carry him?" Her jaw clenched. She fired back into the white muzzle flash swallowed by storm. "I don't think I know." The medic shouted, voice raw. "We can't fight them off, we're exposed." She scanned the ridge, saw it then. A narrow crevice, jagged but climbable, shelter above. Her voice was steel, "Up now." The sergeant barked a curse. The medic hesitated. The radio tech sobbed, but she didn't wait. She hauled the prisoner toward the crevice, her muscles screaming. Bullets chased them, snapping stone, tearing snow. The sergeant fired cover shots. The medic dragged the radio tech, and somehow, through chaos, through storm, they reached it. A narrow cut in the ridge, deep enough to crawl inside. They collapsed into shadow. The storm still screamed outside, muffling the enemy shouts, but for now they were hidden. For now. The medic slumped, gasping. The radio tech curled into himself, rocking, muttering. The sergeant paced like a caged animal, jaw tight. She crouched beside the prisoner. His skin was ash-gray, his breath shallow. Blood stained his lips, yet his eyes still burned. "You should have left me," he rasped. She shook her head. "You're not dead yet." His gaze pierced her. "And if keeping me alive kills them?" Her throat closed. She looked at her team, the medic broken, the radio tech shattered, the sergeant boiling with mutiny. She had no answer. But the prisoner gave one for her. His voice was a whisper, carried in the silence between storms. "Then you'll finally understand what I've carried." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" His eyes glistened, pain and memory tangled. "Those files you cling to, they're not strategy, they're not numbers, they're names. Every name I couldn't save." The words landed like stones in her chest. "Your command thinks they're intelligence," he coughed. "But they're memorials. Soldiers, civilians, families, villages burned, entire towns erased, all cataloged, all hidden. My legacy isn't victory, it's graves." Her breath caught. The sergeant heard too. His voice was sharp. "So we're dying for his sins." The prisoner's eyes didn't leave hers. "You're dying for the truth." The storm howled louder. The team's silence was heavier than the wind. Her hand trembled against her rifle. Her mind reeled. Those files weren't tactical gold, they were ghosts, not a weapon, a confession. And yet her chest tightened. Maybe that mattered more. The medic finally broke the silence. His voice was hollow. "So what? We carry names, we die for words." The prisoner whispered, "Names are heavier than bullets, and harder to bury." Her throat burned. She thought of her own ghosts, her brother's face in the coffin, the empty chair at her mother's table, the silence of nights she couldn't sleep. She understood too well. The sergeant snarled, "Packing. Enough. We're done bleeding for this. When the storm breaks, I'm leaving him." Her voice cracked like stone. "You're not." His head snapped to her. "Or what?" She raised her rifle, slow, steady. "Or you won't be the one walking away." The silence was a knife. Then the radio tech whimpered, breaking it. "They're coming." Shadows moved outside the crevice, enemy voices rising, searchlights piercing the snow. The storm had hidden them long enough. Her chest tightened. She chambered a round. The sergeant gripped his rifle, the medic cursed, the prisoner closed his eyes. The mountain wasn't done with them. Not yet. The storm broke at dawn. Not cleanly, not gently. It didn't end, it just tore open in places, thin cracks where weak light bled through gray. Enough to see, enough to kill. She crouched at the mouth of the crevice, snow stinging her face. The valley below was alive with movement. Figures in white camo, rifles slung, voices echoing. Their dogs barked, claws tearing snow. The enemy was closing a net. Behind her, the medic tried to still his shaking hands. The radio tech muttered into silence, rocking like a broken child. The sergeant, he stood ready, jaw set, rifle firm, but his eyes never strayed far from the prisoner. The man who told them the files were graves. Names, not numbers, not tactics, names. Her chest still burned with that revelation. She felt them like weight in her own lungs, because she knew what names could do. The prisoner stirred, coughing. His voice rasped low, barely audible. "They won't stop, not until I'm erased." She turned to him. "Why?" His eyes glistened. "Because I kept the record, I disobeyed, they ordered silence. I wrote every name, every child, every civilian, every soldier abandoned, it's all there. Proof that none of this was war, it was slaughter." Her throat tightened. The medic swallowed hard. "So we're not saving strategy, we're saving evidence." The prisoner nodded once. The sergeant barked a bitter laugh. "Evidence no one will read. Evidence that'll rot in some vault while we die in the snow." She snapped at him, voice sharp. "It matters." "Why?" His eyes locked on hers hard. "Why die for pages, for ghosts?" Her lips parted, but words stalled. Why did it matter? Why was she dragging him, bleeding for him, when every rational bone said let go? The prisoner's gaze found hers, soft, knowing, because you've lost names too. Her breath hitched, her brother's face flickered in her mind. His coffin draped in a flag, his name etched in stone, her mother's silent grief, never spoken, always there. She whispered almost to herself, "He was 19. The medic looked at her, the sergeant froze. The radio tech finally lifted his head. She hadn't told them before, hadn't said it out loud, but now the storm had cracked more than the sky. "He believed," she said softly, "that his death would mean something, that someone would remember, and I swore I wouldn't let his name be just another stone, just another silence." The prisoner's eyes didn't waver. "Then you understand, that's why you can't let me go. Because these names," he coughed, blood, voice breaking, "they're all someone's brother, someone's child, someone's ghost." The sergeant's face was stone, but his voice was iron. "And if your ghosts kill the rest of us?" Her rifle lifted, steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Then at least they'll be remembered." The medic whispered, "God help us." The radio tech whimpered, "They're closer." He was right. Shapes moved near the ridge, rifles glinting in thin light. Dogs pulled at leashes. Voices rose, sharper, nearer. The sergeant swore under his breath. "We can't sit here. We fight now or we're done." Her mind raced. Fight, climb, flee, it was all suicide and less. Her eyes caught movement higher up the ridge. Loose snow, overhangs heavy with ice. A weak point. A weapon the mountain itself could provide. She pointed. "There, we can bring it down." The medic blinked. "An avalanche, you'll bury us with them." Her jaw clenched. Better buried under silence than captured alive. The sergeant smirked darkly. "Finally, we agree on something." She ignored him, checked her rifle. lined her sights on the fragile shelf of snow and ice above the enemy's path. But before she could fire, the sergeant grabbed her arm. His grip was iron. Not with him here. Her eyes snapped to him. His voice was low, steady. He dies first. Then we bring it down, no more arguments. Her chest burned. Her finger twitched on the trigger. The prisoner didn't speak. He just looked at her, eyes heavy with resignation, as if he'd known all along this moment would come. The medic muttered, "Do something." The radio tech whimpered, "Please." Her heart pounded, and she made her choice. She wrenched free of the sergeant's grip, swung her rifle upward and fired. The crack split the storm, a single shot, then silence. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the mountain roared. Snow tore free, a wall of white thundering down the slope. Ice shattered, rock groaned. The avalanche swallowed the enemy in a storm louder than war. Shouts turned to screams, screams turned to nothing. The earth shook beneath them, snow choking the air. She dragged the prisoner back, shielding him with her own body. The medic clung to the rock. The radio tech screamed into the storm. The sergeant cursed, fury swallowed by thunder. Then, as sudden as it began, silence. The world was buried in white, the valley erased, the enemy gone. She coughed, pulling herself upright. Snow clung to her lashes, her breath raw. They were alive, somehow. The medic laughed, broken and breathless. The radio tech sobbed relief. The sergeant's eyes, though, burned like fire. He stalked toward her, rifle low but ready. "You should have let me end him. Instead, you nearly killed us all." Her voice was hoarse but unyielding. "We're still breathing." His face twisted, "For now." The prisoner coughed again, blood staining snow. He whispered, "It won't matter. More will come. They'll never stop." She knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. "Then we don't stop either." He looked at her, weary, fatting. "You'll drown in ghosts." Her chest ached, but she answered anyway. "Then let them pull me under." The sergeant turned away, snarling. The medic shook his head. The radio tech muttered nonsense to himself. The storm had broken, but the fracture inside the team was deeper than ever. And as the prisoner's breath rasped weaker, as the snow settled around them, one truth gnawed at her. The mountain had taken the enemy, but the real fight, the one that would decide if any of this meant anything, was still waiting. And it was closer than she wanted to admit. Why did the world sound so quiet after so much violence? She sat on the edge of the burned-out compound, rifle across her knees, helmet dangling loosely in her hand. The air smelled of iron, smoke, and something older, like the ruins had been waiting centuries for this moment. The others were gone, some walked away. Some never did. She stayed. Not because she had to, not because of orders, but because leaving felt like betrayal. Her chest rose and fell slowly. A deep ache pressed against her ribs, not from wounds, but from the memories rushing in. She could hear them. The ones who had laughed with her, the ones who had argued, the ones who had confessed fears in the dark. Their voices weren't gone. They echoed inside her, refusing silence. She tilted her head back and looked at the sky. The same sky she had flown under. The same sky she had watched through a rifle scope. The same sky that had seen her crawl through dirt with broken hands. Always the same, always indifferent. But her gaze softened, because indifference wasn't cruelty, it was permission. The sky didn't care whether she lived or died, which meant she was free to choose. Footsteps crunched behind her. A medic she barely knew sat down beside her. He didn't speak at first. Didn't have to. They just sat there, the silence between them heavy, real. Finally he said, "You should have died more than once." She turned her face toward him, half a smile pulling at lips too dry, too cracked. "Maybe, but survival isn't luck." His brow furrowed. She looked back at the horizon. "It's a refusal to let death be the final command." The words hung in the air, weighty, unpolished, true. Somewhere in the distance, a bird broke through the smoke, wings cutting across the pale blue sky. Small, fragile, determined. She stood slow but steady, her shadow stretching long against the ruined ground. One more mission might come, or maybe none, but it no longer mattered. Because survival wasn't the victory, dignity was. And dignity, she knew now, doesn't speak. It simply acts. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of memory, of sacrifice, of quiet strength. The kind that lingers, even when the voice ends.